My name is Claire Donovan. I am 39 years old, a high school art teacher, and I live in the rainy heart of Seattle, Washington. 32 days ago, my husband Michael died without warning, leaving me with a house that feels too quiet, bills stacking on the counter, and a daughter who barely speaks to me. This morning I decided to sell his car to keep the lights on. But when I opened the glove box, I found something small, hidden, and impossible to ignore. And in that moment, I knew my life was about to split in two. If you have ever uncovered a truth you wish you could forget, tell me about it in the comments. And do not forget to subscribe so you can follow me through every turn of what happened next. That morning, the sky outside was the color of wet cement. A thin drizzle clung to the windows and the air carried the scent of cedar and cold pavement. I stood at the kitchen counter, staring at the pile of unpaid bills spread like a losing hand of cards. My fingers lingered on the red overdue stamp on the gas bill. Selling Michael's car would at least keep the heat on. The sedan sat at the far end of the driveway, its silver paint dulled under streaks of rain and pollen. Michael used to wash it every Sunday until it gleamed. He believed a man's car said everything about him. I used to laugh at that. Now I just needed it gone. I pulled the spare keys from the drawer and stepped outside. The rain was light but persistent, the kind that slips beneath your coat and settles into your bones. The moment I opened the driver's door, the air inside wrapped around me like an old memory. Leather, cedarwood cologne, and something else I could not name but knew belonged only to him. I slid into the seat and reached for the glove box, wanting to clear out any papers before listing the car. The click of the latch echoed in the quiet. Inside were the expected things: insurance papers, a phone charger, a pair of sunglasses. I placed them one by one on the passenger seat, my mind drifting. Then I saw it. A small black USB drive wedged deep in the corner. No brand, no markings, except for a tiny label with a single letter, written in hurried ink. My pulse picked up. Michael's handwriting had always been precise. This was not his. I held the drive in my palm, feeling its weight as if it could tip the balance of my life in an instant. I closed the glove box slowly, the way you might shut a door you are not ready to walk through. Rain tapped against the windshield, steady and insistent. I sat there, gripping the USB like it might answer questions I had not yet dared to ask. I did not plug it in right away. Instead, I carried it inside, through the hallway that still smelled faintly of his aftershave, past the framed photo of the three of us on the Oregon coast, smiling into a summer that now felt like another life. Upstairs, in the study that I had not entered since the funeral, I placed the drive on the desk. The room was untouched. Books on immigration law lined the shelves, their spines uncreased. A certificate from a refugee organization hung above the desk. Helping displaced families had been Michael's passion, though he never spoke much about the details. The silence pressed in. I sat down, my fingers hovering over the laptop. I could still close the drawer, tuck the USB away, and sell the car without knowing. But the moment had already passed. The drive slid into the port with a faint click. A single folder appeared on the screen. No title. Just an unmarked yellow icon. And in that still, heavy room, I double-clicked. The folder opened like a held breath. A grid of files snapped into place on the screen, each one a square window into something I had not been invited to see. Dozens of documents, short videos, scans of forms, a scatter of photos. Most had plain labels, numbers and dates that meant nothing to me yet. A few carried scraps of words that cut straight through me. Thank you. Urgent. Clinic. Papers for D. I clicked the first letter and watched the cursor blink while my heart timed itself against the rain on the window. Dear Michael, thank you again for agreeing to help. I do not know what I would have done without you. Phew. The name tugged at an old memory I could not place. Face without features. Voice without sound. I opened another. Am scared. The fever is back. We can try the clinic if you think it is safe. Daniel asks about you when the wind is strong. He thinks windy days mean kites. I scrolled and the years slid past. Messages that sounded like they were typed quickly from a phone between buses or work shifts or waiting rooms. Some were practical. Documents needed for an application, deadlines, a neighbor willing to sign as a reference. Some were gentle and airy, slipped between the heavy lines like petals on a sidewalk. He drew a rocket and put your name on the side. He said the rocket will find you if you are too far to drive. I did not know how long I read before my hand finally began to shake. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling while a quiet, cold thought took shape. This was not a stranger asking my husband where to find one more signature. This was a woman speaking to a man she trusted with the weight of her life and the life of her son. I forced myself to open the photos. A boy with wind in his hair and a grin that tipped to one side. A woman with deep brown eyes that did not ask for pity. A paper kite pinned high above a beach where the sky looked like silver glass. In 3 pictures near the center of the grid, Michael stood with them. He had his arm around the boy in 2 of them. In the 3rd he held the kite string high while the boy leapt, mouth open in a shout I could almost hear. Michael's face was lit from the inside the way it had been on the day Hannah was born. I clicked away so quickly that the cursor stuttered. My throat tightened, hot and raw. I told myself to breathe. Again. I tried to stand, but the chair caught the back of my legs and I sat hard, palms pressed to the desk until the edge cut crescent moons into my skin. Down the hall, a floorboard creaked. Hannah's door closed, a soft thud that still felt like a slammed fist. I should have gone to her. I should have left the room, closed the laptop, and gone to stand outside her door and say her name until she answered. Instead, I stayed where I was and kept reading. The next document was a scanned receipt from a small clinic on the south side. The one after that was a form from a community center that helps with legal aid. At the bottom of one scan, a handwritten note slid under my skin like a splinter. Box is safe. Key where cufflinks sleep. The room changed around me. The lamp seemed brighter. The shadows sharpened, leaning toward me. I pulled open the right-hand drawer and saw the cufflink case I had given Michael for our 5th anniversary. The walnut lid clicked under my thumb. Inside, between a blue silk pocket square and 2 onyx studs, lay a small silver key on a tag with a number and the name of a bank downtown. I held it there for a while. Then I set it back as if it were hot and the wood might blister. The door to the study swung wider. Hannah stood there with her hoodie sleeves tugged over her fists and her eyes swollen from sleep she was not getting. She saw the open laptop, the faces on the screen, my hands, and the way I could not quite meet her eyes. "What are you doing?" she said, voice soft then sharper. "Why are you in here?" I swallowed and tried to answer without letting the words shake. "I am trying to understand," I said. "Understand what?" Her gaze fell to the photo of Michael holding the kite string for the boy. "That is not us." "No," I said. "It is not." She crossed the room too quickly, yanked the laptop toward her, scrolled with a jerky, angry hand. Photos blurred past. Letters flicked open and shut. She stopped on one where Michael's face filled the frame, caught mid-laugh by a hand that did not belong to me. She stared for a long time, then shut the laptop with a soft, final click. "You are digging," she said. But it sounded like an accusation against herself too, as if she had wished for this proof and hated herself for it. "He is gone. He cannot explain." I did not tell her that he had explained something, or that a key lay hidden where cufflinks slept. I did not tell her about the box that waited downtown. I only said what felt true in the room where the air smelled like paper and cedar. I need to know what we are standing on. If it is truth, I will stand. If it is a lie, it is already breaking under us. She shook her head, a small motion, a child fighting tears. "I am going to Grandma's," she said. It sounded less like a plan and more like a life raft someone had thrown, and she would not ask who had thrown it. She backed out of the doorway before I could move. The front door opened, the street's wet air rushed in, and then the house fell back into the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. I sat until the light in the window shifted from slate to iron. Then I picked up the key. I left a note on the counter so my mother-in-law would know Hannah had come, that she was safe, that I would call. I locked the door, slid into my coat, and drove downtown through a city that felt more like a photograph than a place I understood. The bank was one of those old buildings with tall windows and a lobby that smelled like paper dust and polished stone. A clerk with a gentle voice asked for identification and the tag number. He did not look surprised when I said Michael's name. He only nodded and led me down a corridor where the sound of my shoes made more noise than I wanted them to. In the quiet of the private room, the box slid free from its slot and landed on the table with a soft thud. The key turned once. Inside was a folder thicker than a book, and a sealed envelope with my name written in the slanted, steady hand I knew as well as my own. I opened the letter first because I could not do anything else until I heard his voice. "Claire, if you are reading this, I waited too long. I told myself I was protecting you and Hannah. I was protecting myself. I failed you in ways I cannot undo, but I can tell you the truth from beginning to end." The words rose steady as a tide. He wrote about a volunteer shift at a community clinic where he had met a young mother who spoke with care and moved like someone who had learned to take up less space than she needed. He wrote about a night when he had felt alone inside our marriage and had crossed a line he could not step back over. He wrote about a boy born with eyes that made him want to be better and a fear that hardened into silence. He wrote about money moved in small sums and papers filed in quiet rooms, and a promise he never had the courage to speak aloud in our kitchen, under our roof, where the life we had built waited for him to be honest. "If you can," he wrote, "help them stand. For the boy first. He did not choose any of this. If anything I have done puts Hannah at risk, shield her. Whatever it takes. The rest is in the folder." The room had no sound except my breath and the faint hum of the light overhead. I set the letter down and opened the folder. Inside, careful and exact, were copies of applications, lists of contact names, notes from meetings, receipts, and a birth certificate with the name Daniel and the father's line typed with Michael Donovan. I did not cry there. I felt like a lake under ice, all the water moving but the surface holding because the air was too cold to let it break. I slid everything back in place, locked the box, and let the clerk guide it away. Outside, the city carried on. Bus side. A cyclist passed by with a stripe of rain on his back. My hand shook only when I put the key in the ignition. At home, I stood a long time in the hallway, listening to the quiet. The photo on the wall caught a band of late light and Hannah's smile burned with 10-year-old certainty. The memory did not ask permission to enter. It was her birthday, a cake we had baked too long, frosting I had tried to cover the burn with, Michael's laugh when she smeared a stripe across his nose. I pressed my fingers to my eyes until sparks of color blossomed and faded. Night came early, thick and slow. I heated soup and forgot to eat it. I washed a plate that was already clean. I stood at the window and watched the street lamps lift pale circles onto the wet pavement. When my phone vibrated on the counter, I jumped. A message from my mother-in-law. "She is here. Give her space." I typed "thank you" and deleted it. I typed "I will come in the morning" and deleted that too. I set the phone face down and went back to the study because everything I could not say was sitting inside that folder. And if I could not fix what had been done, I could at least understand the shape of it. I spread the documents across the desk the way a cartographer might lay out maps of a coastline she meant to sail. A line of small bank transfers, always on the 1st and the 15th. A lease in the South End with a date 3 years old. An email printout from a community advocate named Rosalie who had written that Daniel's health issue would likely be resolved with consistent care and nutrition. A note from Sophia to Michael that said simply, "We are still here. I am trying. Thank you for seeing us." By the time I reached the bottom of the stack, dawn had begun to pull at the edges of the blinds. I carried a few of the documents to the kitchen and made a copy of the lease address by hand, the numbers careful and dark. I told myself I would only drive by. I would not knock. I would not open another door I was not prepared to walk through. I left Hannah a note that said only that I loved her and would be back before lunch. I did not sign it, as if my name might do more harm than good. The streets were slick again, painted with light and the oily sheen that comes when the rain never fully stops. I crossed bridges and passed neighborhoods where I never had reason to turn before. The building at the address stood between a taqueria and a laundromat, paint peeling, a small garden with lavender and sage that someone tended with patient hands. I pulled to the curb across the street and folded my fingers together until the knuckles ached. A door opened. A woman stepped out with a grocery bag in each arm and the kind of posture that comes from years of moving through the world without wanting to draw a crowd. Behind her, a boy bounced down the stairs with a backpack and the momentum of someone who believed the day might surprise him. He had the same untidy light hair as in the photos. He had the same half smile. When he laughed at something she said, his mouth tipped in the same direction as Michael's. I did not plan the breath that left me. Just went. Something inside me arranged itself and then came slightly undone, like stitches pulled by an invisible hand. I could have opened the door then. I could have crossed the street and said the truth and let it hit whatever it hit. I stayed where I was. My eyes followed them as they turned the corner and were gone. I drove home on side streets, because the highway felt too fast for someone whose life had changed shape and was still soft around the edges. In the driveway, I sat and listened to the engine tick as it cooled. The house felt colder than it had when I left, as if my absence had taken a layer of heat with it. Hannah's room was quiet. The note I had left on the counter lay where I had placed it, untouched. I boiled water and watched steam curl like ribbon. The kettle clicked off. I did not pour. I stood at the sink with my hands pressed to the edge and thought about the letter in my bag with my name written on it, and another letter, written for a different name I had never spoken aloud in my kitchen. Fear. The screen of my phone lit with a new message. A number I did not recognize. A short line that felt like a bridge laid across a chasm at night. Are you Claire? This is Rosalie from the community center. Michael gave me your number a long time ago with instructions I hoped I would never use. If you want talk, I am here. I stared at the words while the steam thinned and disappeared. Then I typed a reply with the same care I might use cutting fabric for a dress I meant to wear to a room where eyes would watch. I'm Claire. I would like to talk. I set the phone down. I took a breath that hurt a little at the edges and went back to the study, to the folder, to the life that did not wait for permission to arrive. The house held its quiet. The rain began again, soft but sure. Somewhere in the city, a boy lifted a backpack and started a walk to school. Somewhere else, my daughter slept in the guest room of her grandmother's house with her fist tucked under her cheek the way she had as a child. Rosalie's voice was warmer than I expected. We spoke the next morning, her words steady but careful, as if she had been holding them for a long time and wasn't sure how much I was ready to hear. She told me she had worked with Michael for years at the community center, especially in cases where families were at risk of losing their homes or facing deportation. She spoke about his stubbornness, his belief that paperwork could be a shield, and his habit of showing up with a thermos of coffee when everyone else had gone home. And then she spoke about Sophia. She was barely more than a girl when I met her, Rosalie said, her voice softening. 17, with a newborn and a bag of clothes she could carry on her shoulder. She didn't speak much English then, but she understood enough to know the man she married was gone and not coming back. Michael was the one who convinced her to trust us. I listened, my eyes on the rain sliding down the kitchen window. It was easier to keep my gaze there than on the folder of documents spread out on the table. Rosalie went on, explaining how Michael had kept Sophia and Daniel out of the system long enough for her to get stable work. How he had arranged medical appointments quietly, so no one could trace them back to the wrong set of eyes. Whatever you've heard, Claire, she said at last, I believe he cared for you, but he cared for them too. In his own way. In his own way. The phrase lodged in my chest. What way was that? Keeping them hidden like fragile glass in a dark cupboard? Or keeping us apart, each in our own life, believing we were the only ones who mattered? Rosalie didn't press for answers. She only asked if I wanted to meet Sophia. The word yes came out before I had a chance to think about it. That afternoon I found myself on the South End again. The building looked the same as before. Weathered paint, lavender swaying in the wind, the smell of fresh tortillas from the taqueria next door. I clutched the envelope Michael had left for Sophia, the one I'd kept unopened since finding it in the safety deposit box. I knocked twice. The door opened to reveal a woman smaller than I'd imagined. Her hair was pulled back in a loose braid, her eyes dark and guarded. For a moment neither of us spoke. "You're Claire," she said finally, not quite a question. "Yes." My voice was steadier than I felt. She glanced behind me, as if half expecting someone else to appear. "Is Hannah with you?" "No," I said quickly. "She's with her grandmother." A flicker of something passed across her face. Relief, maybe, or guilt. Then she stepped back. "Would you like to come in?" The apartment was small but carefully kept. The scent of lavender mixed with something warm from the kitchen. A single bookshelf leaned against the wall, crowded with paperbacks and old photo frames. "Tea?" she asked, already reaching for the kettle. I sat on the edge of the couch, the envelope resting like a weight in my hands. "He left this for you." She didn't open it immediately. Her fingers traced the crease of the paper, her eyes fixed on the handwriting. "I loved him," she said quietly. "Not the way you did. Not with a wedding and a house. But he saved us." The words sat between us like a fragile glass. I could have shattered them with one question. "Why didn't you stay away?" But I didn't. Instead I asked, "Does Daniel know?" Her gaze dropped to her lap. "He knows his father worked far away. That he couldn't be here much. He believes that meant he cared." Her voice caught on the last word. "I never corrected him." I nodded, the motion small. "And now?" Her hands tightened around the envelope. "Now," she said, "I don't know." We sat in silence for a long time. The sound of the kettle filled the room, followed by the clink of cups. When she handed me the tea, her fingers brushed mine. "You don't have to do anything," she said. "Not for us." "I know." I took a sip, the steam curling into my face. "But someone should." Her eyes met mine, searching for something I wasn't sure I had. Trust maybe. Or forgiveness. When I left, the sky had begun to darken, the first threads of evening settling across the city. I didn't look back at the building. I kept walking until I reached my car, the envelope still sealed in her hands, and the quiet weight of a decision beginning to take shape in mine. Home, the house was dim. Hannah's room was still empty. I went to the kitchen, poured another cup of tea, and stood by the window. Somewhere in that city, a boy with Michael's smile was finishing his homework. And somewhere else, my daughter was still deciding whether to come back. The space between them felt endless. But I knew I had just stepped into it. 3 days passed before I heard the front door open without warning. It was late afternoon, the sun barely breaking through the heavy Seattle clouds, and I was in the kitchen slicing apples. I knew it was her by the sound of sneakers dragging across the tile. Hannah didn't say hello. She dropped her duffel bag by the doorway, the thud loud in the quiet house. I kept my eyes on the knife, on the steady motion of the blade, because looking at her too soon felt dangerous. After a long silence she spoke. "Oh, did you meet them?" I laid the knife down, the scent of apples sharp in the air. "Yes." She stepped closer. "And? It's complicated," I said, keeping my voice even. "But they're not monsters. Sophia isn't the villain in this story. She's just someone who made hard choices." Hannah let out a short, bitter laugh. "Choices. Right." She crossed her arms, leaning against the counter. "I thought I knew who he was, Mom. He was my hero. And now?" Her voice cracked, but she pushed through it. "Now I don't even know if he wanted to be my dad, or if we were just the family he settled for." I turned to face her. "Don't say that." "Why not? You're thinking it too." I shook my head. "No. I'm heartbroken. But I don't think you were ever second. I think he was torn and he made the worst possible choice. He hid instead of facing it." Her arms tightened across her chest, jaw set. "I don't want to meet that boy. I don't care who he is." "You don't have to," I said softly. "Not now. Maybe not ever. But I want you to understand something." I opened the drawer beside me and pulled out Michael's letter, the one he had left for me in the safety deposit box. I held it out to her. "I think you should read this." She looked at it like it was something poisonous. I don't need to read his excuses. They're not excuses. They're the truth he didn't have the courage to tell us while he was alive. Her gaze shifted to the letter again, her fingers twitching like she might take it. After a long moment, she stepped forward and pulled it from my hand. Then she turned and walked down the hall to her room. The door didn't slam this time. That night, the light in her room stayed on. I passed by once and hesitated, listening. I didn't hear her crying, but I knew she was. I didn't knock. Some grief needs to breathe before it can be touched. The next morning I woke early and sat at my desk. The rain was soft against the windows, the kind that made the air smell like wet leaves. I pulled a blank sheet of paper toward me and began to write. Dear Daniel, you don't know me. Maybe your mother has mentioned my name. Maybe not. That's okay. I'm not writing to confuse you or to take anything from you. I'm writing because sometimes the adults around you make choices that leave children holding questions they never asked to carry. My name is Claire. I was married to your father, Michael. I don't know what he told you about where he was when he wasn't here. Maybe you think he was a man too busy to be around. Maybe you've always felt his absence and made peace with it. The truth is, he loved you quietly from a distance, in the only way he thought he could. That wasn't enough. It wasn't fair to you, and it wasn't fair to my daughter either. But I need you to know this. Your existence is not a mistake. You are not someone's secret. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a boy with a curious mind, a bright laugh, and more strength than you know. I saw you once from across the street, and I saw my husband's smile in your face. Stopped me in my tracks. I won't pretend this is easy for any of us. But despite the sadness and betrayal, I want you to know you are not to blame. You are loved. You deserve every good thing. One day if you want to talk or ask questions, I'll be here. Not as a replacement for anything, but maybe as a bridge. Until then, be kind to your mother. She's braver than most. And be kind to yourself, especially when the world feels confusing. With warmth. Claire. I folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, and wrote his name on the front. I didn't mail it. I slid it into the top drawer of my desk. A part of me hoped Sophia would find it one day. That afternoon, Hannah appeared in the kitchen. Her eyes were tired, her voice quiet. I read the letter. He nodded. You don't have to forgive him. I don't. Not yet, she said. Then, almost in a whisper. But I don't hate him either. For the first time in weeks, her voice didn't shake. We stood side by side in silence, the late sunlight catching in the dust between us. The space between us didn't feel as sharp. The weeks that followed were slow, like walking through water. Hannah spent more time in her room, but now and then she'd drift into the kitchen. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. The silence was different now. Not empty, just waiting. One evening I passed the living room and saw her on the couch with her laptop open, watching old home videos. She didn't hide the screen. On it, Michael wore a ridiculous birthday hat, holding a cake crooked in his hands while frosting dripped onto his shirt. Hannah giggled from behind cupped hands. I miss him, she murmured, eyes still on the screen. I sat beside her. I do too. She leaned her head against my shoulder, the first time she'd done that since the funeral. After a pause, she asked, Do you think he meant to fix it? Before he died? Thought about it. I think he was trying. In the only broken way he knew how. She nodded. That seemed enough for now. The next morning my phone buzzed. A message from Sophia, just a photo. Daniel stood at a science fair booth, grinning beside a homemade volcano. The caption read, He got second place. He wanted you to know. I stared at the photo for a long time, smiling through a sting of tears. Later I showed it to Hannah. She studied it for a beat longer than I expected. He looks like Dad, she whispered. I know. She didn't look away. We didn't make promises or set timelines. But I could feel it, that the space between them was just a little smaller than it had been. It was a Sunday morning when the question came, so softly I almost thought I'd imagined it. Hannah was sitting at the kitchen table, tracing the rim of her mug with one fingertip, her hair still mussed from sleep. The smell of cinnamon rolls was thick in the air, the kind of smell that settles into a house and makes it feel lived in again. "Do you think," she hesitated, glancing toward the window, "he'd like to come over? For dinner, I mean. The boy." I stopped mid-pour, the stream of coffee wavering in the mug. "Daniel." She shrugged, as if that might hide the weight of the question. "If he wants to." I didn't move right away. It felt like the floor beneath us had shifted slightly. The same kitchen but a different map. "I think he might," I said. She nodded once, quick and almost shy, then took a sip from her mug. The conversation ended there, but the air felt charged like the moments before a storm. I messaged Sophia later that afternoon. The reply came quickly. "We would be honored. He might be nervous, but I think it's time." The week passed in quiet preparation. I cleaned the house more than it needed, baked too much, and kept catching myself staring at the front door as if it might open early. Hannah avoided talking about it, but I noticed the way she kept rearranging the chairs in the living room, the way she set an extra place at the table 2 days in advance. When Sunday came, the sky was cold and clear. I made spaghetti and garlic bread. Simple, familiar, something that didn't demand too much of anyone. The house smelled warm, the kind of welcome you can't fake. At exactly 6 o'clock, there was a knock. I wiped my hands on a towel, but Hannah was already at the door. Daniel stood there in a navy sweater 2 sizes too big, a book clutched tight to his chest. Sophia stood just behind him, her expression polite but tense, like someone stepping onto a bridge she wasn't sure could hold her weight. For a moment no one moved. Hannah and Daniel looked at each other, 2 strangers bound by something neither had chosen. "Hey," Hannah said quietly. "Hi," he replied, his grip on the book tightening. The silence between them was thick enough to stop time. Then, to my surprise, Hannah stepped back. "You coming in or what?" He nodded and stepped inside. Dinner was awkward the way first meetings often are. Daniel picked at his spaghetti, and Hannah twirled hers without eating much. I let the conversation find its own pace. We talked about school, about the weather, about the science fair where he'd built the volcano. When he mentioned he liked physics, Hannah's eyes flicked up from her plate. "That's my best subject," she said. "Really?" His voice cracked just slightly. "You like space stuff? Black holes, time dilation, all that." "I kind of want to be an astrophysicist," she admitted. Daniel blinked. "That's actually really cool." It wasn't much, but it was enough. After dinner, the kids drifted into the living room. I could hear them talking, tentative at first, then with small bursts of laughter that startled me with how natural they sounded. Sophia and I stayed in the kitchen, washing dishes in a quiet rhythm. "You've raised a good girl," she said softly. "So have you," I replied. We didn't say more. We didn't need to. When it was time for them to leave, Daniel hesitated at the door. "Thank you for the letter," he said, his voice small but steady. "You're welcome," I told him. "And for tonight." "It was nice." Smiled. "You can come again anytime." Sophia squeezed my hand before stepping out into the cold. I watched them walk down the street, their figures growing smaller against the dark, until they turned the corner. When I closed the door, Hannah was still standing in the hallway. She glanced toward the window, then back at me. "He's okay," she said simply. He nodded. "He is." She leaned into my side, and we stood there for a while, saying nothing, the hum of the heater the only sound between us. That night, as I turned off the lights, I realized something. The house no longer felt like it was holding its breath. Felt like it was learning to breathe again. But breathing, I knew, was just the beginning. The visit started slowly, Sundays mostly. Sometimes Daniel came with Sophia, sometimes he came alone. At first, he stayed close to Hannah, drawn into her orbit in a way that seemed to surprise them both. They'd sit at the kitchen table, she doing her homework, he sketching in a battered notebook. Once, he showed me a drawing of a rocket ship with his name and Hannah's written side by side on the hull. "It's for a school project," he said, cheeks flushed. Marina, no, Sophia, came sometimes too. The first few visits, she stayed near the door, always ready to leave quickly if the air turned tense. But slowly, she began to linger. She brought food, tamales, homemade bread, jars of spiced tea, and we'd talk while the kids worked on their own projects. It was during one of those afternoons, as the late winter light stretched thin across the kitchen, that Hannah asked, almost casually, "Do you want to do a science fair project together?" Daniel froze, a pencil halfway to the page. "Like, a joint project?" He shrugged. "Why not?" His smile came slow, like a sunrise breaking through fog. "Yeah, I'd like that." From then on, the project took over the house. Cardboard boxes became planets, paintbrushes turned the kitchen into a solar system, and tiny LED lights transformed orbit paths into something almost magical. The night of the fair, I stood at the back of the auditorium next to Sophia. Our hands brushed once, and neither of us moved away. On stage, Hannah and Daniel stood shoulder to shoulder, explaining their model with a kind of quiet confidence I hadn't seen in either of them for months. When they won second place, Daniel groaned about messing up the part about Jupiter's rotation speed. Hannah nudged him. "No one noticed. You were great." He grinned at her, and in that grin, I saw something that belonged only to him. No shadow of Michael, no ghost of secrets. Just Daniel. That night, back at home, Hannah sat on the edge of my bed, swinging her legs like she used to when she was younger. "I don't think I'll ever stop being mad at Dad," she said. "I don't think you have to," I told her. She looked down at her hands. "But I'm glad Daniel's here." My throat tightened. Me too. I knew then that we weren't done. Not with grief, not with rebuilding, but we had found something worth holding on to. And I also knew there were still things in Michael's folder I hadn't shown anyone. Things that might change everything again. Started with a sound. A faint rustle in the study, like paper shifting when no one's there to move it. I was alone in the house, the rain whispering at the windows, the smell of coffee curling from the kitchen. Hannah was at school. Daniel wouldn't be here until Sunday. Sophia had texted earlier about a work shift that might keep her late for a few weeks. The noise came again. I stepped into the study. The folder sat exactly where I'd left it on the desk, its edges square and sharp, the weight of it pulling at the wood. I'd gone through it before. At least I thought I had. Legal forms, receipts, bank statements, contact lists. But as I opened it now, I saw something I hadn't noticed the first time. A thin divider, its tab so worn it blended into the manila. I pulled it up and found a second stack of papers. These weren't neatly clipped. They were folded, some torn along the edges, like they'd been handled often. My fingers slid through them one by one. The first was a receipt from a storage facility on the outskirts of the city, paid in cash. The second, a printout of an email I didn't recognize. No subject line, no signature, just a message. "The box will be safe here until you can figure out what to do. Don't wait too long." The third stopped me cold. It was a photo. Michael, standing outside a brick building I didn't know. He wasn't looking at the camera. His head was turned toward someone out of frame. His mouth caught mid-word. Behind him, a door stood half open, a dark sliver of a hallway visible. And in the corner of the photo, almost hidden by shadow, there was a man, tall, thin, watching. I flipped the photo over. One word was written in blue ink. Bridgewater. I set it down carefully, my mind running through the places I knew. Bridgewater wasn't a street I recognized. Maybe it was a building. Or a name. The next paper was a form from the Department of Homeland Security. Unfiled and signed. Attached to it was a handwritten note in Michael's precise script. "If this goes through, it changes everything. Keep it quiet until we're certain." The rain outside thickened, turning the glass into a blur. I went back to the photo, tracing the outline of the shadowed man. Something about him. His posture, the way he stood slightly turned as if ready to leave, made my skin prickle. I wanted to believe all of this was part of Michael's work for the families he helped. That the storage facility and the strange photo were just fragments of a case he hadn't had time to close. But the email's warning echoed in my head. "Don't wait too long. I folded the papers back into the divider and shut the folder. But my hands wouldn't let go. I sat there for nearly an hour, the photo between my fingers, until my phone buzzed. A message from Sophia. Claire, I don't know if this means anything, but someone's been parked across the street the last 2 nights. Same car. No plates on the front. I might be overthinking, but it's making me uneasy. The air in the room shifted. I glanced at the photo again. The man in the corner. Watching. Type back quickly. Don't open the door if you don't know who it is. Keep the curtains closed. I'll come by tomorrow. Her reply came almost instantly. Bae. I slid the photo into a separate envelope and tucked it into my bag. For the rest of the afternoon, I moved through the house like a shadow of myself. I burned dinner without noticing. I forgot to lock the back door until after midnight. When sleep finally came, it was restless. I kept seeing Michael standing in that photo, looking toward someone I couldn't see. The man in the corner, still and silent. The word Bridgewater written like a key to something I didn't yet understand. By morning I knew 2 things. First, I needed to go to the storage facility. Second, I couldn't tell Hannah, not yet. The next day, I drove north through a steady drizzle, following the address on the receipt. The storage facility was a long, low building with rows of corrugated metal doors painted a dull green. A woman at the front desk looked up from her computer when I came in. Unit number, she asked. I slid the receipt across the counter. She checked her records, then handed me a key without asking questions. The unit was near the back, the ground damp beneath my boots. I unlocked the door and pulled it open, the metal groaning in protest. Inside there was only one thing. A single wooden crate, about the size of a trunk. No markings. No lock. The lid lifted easily. And there, under a layer of folded blankets, was another folder. This one was thicker. I didn't open it. Not there. Not with the damp air curling into my lungs and the shadows of the storage rows pressing close. I closed the crate, locked the unit, and carried the folder back to my car. When I set it on the passenger seat, it felt heavier than it should. Heavier and weighting. The folder sat on the passenger seat like a passenger itself. Even with the engine running, the rain pelting the windshield, and the heater humming low, I could feel it there. Heavy. Present. Waiting. I didn't open it in the car. I drove straight home, my hands locked on the steering wheel, my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few blocks. I told myself it was just habit, just the unease from Sophia's text about the car parked outside her place. But the longer I drove, the more convinced I became that someone was following me. Black sedan 2 cars back. No front plate. I made 3 turns I didn't need to make. Twice circling a block, once ducking down a side street lined with old maple trees, and each time the sedan followed. It wasn't close enough to be aggressive, but it was there. Matching my speed. Matching my turns. Only when I turned into a grocery store parking lot and cut across to the opposite exit did I lose it. Or maybe they simply let me go. When I finally parked in my driveway, the rain had slowed, but my pulse hadn't. I grabbed the folder and went straight into the house, locking the door behind me. The house was empty. Hannah still at school, the silence thick around me. I took the folder to the study, shutting the door even though there was no one to keep out. The clasp was stiff, the paper edges rough against my fingertips. Inside, everything was arranged in careful layers. A stack of photographs bound with a rubber band, several thick envelopes, and a smaller locked leather pouch. I started with the photographs. The first few were what I expected. Michael at community events, smiling beside families, shaking hands with officials. Then the images shifted. Michael outside the same brick building from the photo in the first folder. Michael walking with Sophia, her hair loose. Daniel between them holding both their hands. Michael alone, standing at a bus stop, looking over his shoulder. In the background of that last one, blurred but undeniable, was the same tall, thin man from before. Watching. Always watching. I flipped through more. The man appeared again and again, sometimes near a street corner, sometimes reflected in a shop window, once even standing in the distance behind Daniel's school playground fence. I dropped the photos onto the desk, my hands slick. The first envelope held a stack of typed notes, each page numbered but without dates. They read like transcripts. Conversations recorded in shorthand. Most were harmless. Details about appointments, updates on cases. But in the middle of the stack, one exchange caught my eye. She can't know. Not until I'm certain. Unidentified. If you wait too long, it won't be your decision anymore. Then I'll make sure no one else can decide. The second envelope was worse. Bank withdrawal slips. Large amounts this time. Thousands, not hundreds. The recipient's name was redacted, but the account number didn't match the one I'd seen before for Sophia. I set it aside and reached for the locked leather pouch. The zipper was stiff, the small padlock cool in my palm. No key in sight. The sound of the front door startled me so badly the pouch slipped from my hands and thudded to the floor. "Mom!" Hannah's voice. I shoved the pouch back into the folder and slid it under a stack of magazines on the bookshelf. By the time she stepped into the study, my hands were flat on the desk, my face calm. "Hey," I said, forcing my voice steady. "How was school?" She eyed me for a moment, suspicion flickering there, then shrugged. "Fine." She dropped her backpack onto the floor. "Daniel texted me. He wants to come over this weekend to work on the science project again." He nodded. "That's good." "Yeah." She hesitated, her fingers tugging at her sleeve. "You're okay, right?" I smiled the way I used to when she was small and worried over nothing. "I'm fine." She didn't look convinced, but she let it go. That night, after she went to bed, I returned to the study and pulled the folder back out. I kept thinking about the man in the photographs. The way his presence threaded through Michael's life like a shadow sewn into the seams. I took the photos and laid them side by side, my eyes scanning for something I'd missed before. In one, the man's coat was open just enough to reveal the edge of a patch stitched to the lining. Two curved lines crossing over each other. A logo. An emblem. It wasn't much, but it was something. I grabbed my phone, snapping pictures of every image where he appeared. Then I sent one to Rosalie with a short message. "Do you recognize him?" Her reply came minutes later. "No name. But I've seen him. He's been around the center a few times. Always just outside. Michael told me once not to talk to him. Said he was trouble." Trouble. I closed the folder and locked it in the bottom desk drawer. Tomorrow I'd go to the storage facility again, search for anything I might have missed. But tonight I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere someone was still watching. And they already knew I'd opened the second folder. The rain was falling harder the next morning, turning the street outside into a slick ribbon of silver. I stood at the kitchen window, a mug of coffee cooling in my hands, watching the water bead and streak down the glass. The air felt heavy in that way it sometimes does before something breaks, weather or otherwise. The folder in the desk kept pulling at me like a magnet. Photos. The transcripts. The man with the curved line emblem stitched inside his coat. I didn't want to call Sophia. Not yet. If she knew something, she'd either hide it to protect Daniel or tell me in a way that left out the sharpest edges. And I needed the edges. Instead I called Rosalie. She answered on the third ring. Her voice a mix of caution and familiarity. "You've been looking at those photos again, haven't you?" "Yes," I admitted. "And you've seen him before. You said Michael called him trouble. What did that mean?" Pause, the faint hum of static. "He didn't say much. Just that the man had been sniffing around cases that weren't his concern. Asking about people we'd helped, especially women with children. I thought maybe he was a private investigator, but Michael shut me down fast when I said that. Told me to stay out of it and keep my distance. I thought of Sophia's text about the car parked across from her building. Do you think he could be following her now?" Another pause. "I think he could be following you." I looked out the window again, scanning the street. No black sedan. No parked cars that didn't belong. But the skin between my shoulder blades prickled anyway. After we hung up, I went back to the study and took the locked leather pouch from its hiding place. I didn't have the key, but the padlock was small. One strike from the hammer in the garage and it snapped open. Inside were three things. Flash drive. A single sheet of paper with an address written in Michael's neat hand. And an old passport. Sophia's, her photo faded, the corner of the cover worn soft. The address wasn't the one on her current lease. I looked it up. An apartment building in an industrial area down by the water. A place I'd driven past a dozen times without noticing. The passport was stamped in places that didn't make sense. Mexico City. Vancouver. Once. Guatemala City. The dates didn't line up with the timeline Sophia had told me when we first met. I slid the flash drive into the laptop, heart tapping against my ribs. A single folder popped up, titled Bridgewater. Inside there were only 4 files. The first was a scanned copy of a child's birth certificate. Daniel's, but not the one I'd seen before. This one had no father listed. The second was a series of emails between Michael and someone identified only as R. The language was clipped, urgent. She's not safe there. You need to move her before he finds out. Use Bridgewater if necessary. The third was a scanned police report from 2 years ago. The complaint was from a neighbor at Sophia's old address. Claims of a man loitering near the building, watching the windows. The description matched the one in the photos exactly. Wore a dark coat with a patch inside. The fourth was a short video clip. Grainy but clear enough to recognize faces. It was the brick building from the photos. Michael was there, speaking to the shadowed man. No sound, just movement. The man leaned forward, said something, and Michael stepped back, shaking his head. The man smiled, slow, deliberate, and walked away. My stomach turned cold. I closed the folder and ejected the drive, slipping it back into the pouch. When Hannah got home from school, she found me in the kitchen, staring at the counter without seeing it. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said too quickly. "Just tired." She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me, but she didn't push. That night, after she went to bed, I sat at the desk again, the address Michael had written in front of me. I thought about calling the police. But what would I say? That my late husband had been secretly helping a woman and her son, that a man had been following them for years, and that I'd found proof buried in a storage unit. Sounded like the start of a bad novel. So I decided on something else. I would go to the address. I wouldn't take Hannah. I wouldn't tell Sophia. I needed to see Bridgewater for myself. The next morning I drove down by the water, the smell of salt and diesel in the air. The building was exactly as I'd imagined. Old brick, paint peeling around the windows, a heavy steel door with no visible buzzer. The number matched the one on Michael's note. Across the street, in the shadow of a loading dock, a black sedan idled. The driver's head turned, just enough for me to see the curve of a patch inside his coat. And then, as if he'd been waiting for me to notice, he smiled. The smile stayed on his face for only a second, but it was enough to pin me in place. I didn't even realize my hands had tightened on the steering wheel until the leather creaked under my grip. The sedan's engine was running, a faint vibration in the air. Steam from the exhaust curled into the cold morning, twisting upward like it was trying to disappear. I could have driven away. I should have driven away. But something in me, the part that had been gnawing at unanswered questions since the day I opened the Glovebox, wouldn't let me. I pulled the car into a parking space half a block down, my eyes fixed on the black sedan in the side mirror. The man was still there, watching, waiting. I stepped out into the wind coming off the water, the kind that carried the smell of salt and rust. My boots echoed on the wet pavement as I crossed the street. The closer I got, the more I saw. That same long coat, worn at the edges. The patch inside. 2 curved lines crossing, visible for just a heartbeat when the breeze caught the hem. He didn't look surprised to see me. "You've been following me," I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. His smile tilted, slow and deliberate. "You're Claire." Not a question. "Yes. And you are. Someone who knew your husband better than you did." The words were meant to cut, and they did. But I held his gaze. "Then you'll have no problem telling me why you've been watching me." Or Sophia. Or Daniel. At the mention of their names, something flickered across his face, gone as quickly as it came. You shouldn't be here, he said. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment I found what Michael left behind. He leaned back against the hood of his car, the metal groaning under his weight. He told you about Bridgewater, didn't he? I didn't answer, but my silence must have been enough. Of course he did, he said softly, almost to himself. He always thought he could handle it alone. What is Bridgewater? His smile was thin now, humorless. A mistake. One he couldn't undo. And now you're standing in the middle of it. I took a step closer. You've been following us for years. Why? To make sure history doesn't repeat itself, he said. But if you keep digging, it will. I could hear the water slapping against the docks, the low moan of a foghorn in the distance. What happened between you and Michael? Yes. He glanced toward the steel door of the brick building, the one from the photos. He crossed someone he shouldn't have. Thought he could outplay them. Thought he could hide her, Sophia, and the boy. But hiding only works until someone like me finds the trail. You work for them. Yes. The man's smile came back, cold and sharp. Work for. Well. But I know what they want. And I know what they'll do to get it. And what's that? He leaned in, close enough that I could see the fine lines around his eyes, smell the faint trace of cigarettes on his coat. They want the boy. The words hit me like a physical blow. I must have flinched because his expression softened, just slightly. Don't be here again, he said, stepping back. If you're smart, you'll burn whatever's in that folder. Forget Bridgewater. Forget me. Then he slid into the driver's seat of the black sedan and pulled away, his taillights fading into the gray. I stood there for a long time, the cold biting at my hands, the wind tugging at my coat. The steel door of the brick building stayed shut. No one came or went. By the time I got back to my car, my mind was a storm. If they wanted Daniel, then Michael had been protecting him from more than just an absent father's guilt. Sophia must know something. Maybe not everything, but enough to keep her looking over her shoulder. And if this man, whoever he was telling the truth, then whatever Bridgewater meant, it wasn't just a place. It was a threat. When I got home, Hannah was at the kitchen table with her laptop open, working on the solar system project with Daniel over video chat. She looked up, smiling faintly before going back to the screen. For a moment I just stood in the doorway watching them. The two of them talking about orbit paths and light sources, oblivious to the shadow stretching toward them. I knew then that I couldn't keep this from Sophia any longer. But I also knew telling her might set something in motion that couldn't be undone. I didn't call first. If I gave her time to think, she might decide not to open the door. The rain had eased by the time I pulled up outside Sophia's building, but the street still glistened like wet glass. A faint scent of fried tortillas from the taqueria mixed with a sharp tang of laundry detergent drifting from the laundromat next door. Her window blinds were drawn. For a moment I thought she wasn't home. But then the door opened before I could knock twice. She looked tired, her hair loose, dark circles beneath her eyes, sweater sleeves pulled over her hands. What happened? She asked. Not why are you here? Not is everything okay? Just that. There's a man, I said. Tall. Thin. Long coat with a patch inside. You've seen him before. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the door. He was parked across from your building the other night, I continued. And again today. At a place Michael left me an address for. Bridgewater. She hesitated, her eyes scanning the street before stepping back to let me in. The apartment was dim, the smell of chamomile tea lingering in the air. Daniel's school backpack was propped against the wall by the couch, a jacket half hanging from the hook beside it. Daniel's at a friend's, she said. Then, lowering her voice. You talked to him, didn't you? The man. Yes. Her shoulders slumped. She moved to the kitchen table and sat, gesturing for me to join her. He told me they want Daniel, I said. She didn't react with shock. No denial, no questions. Just a slow, resigned exhale. Michael thought it was over, she murmured. He thought moving us here, keeping things quiet, would be enough. But Bridgewater doesn't forget. The name slid out of her like something bitter she'd been holding too long. What is Bridgewater? Asked. She rubbed her hands together, eyes fixed on the table. It's not a place. Not exactly. It's a network. People who move others across borders when the law won't, or can't. Some of them are decent. Some aren't. Michael got involved through the community center. At first it was just helping with papers, finding safe housing. But one of the groups he worked with, they weren't only moving people. They were moving things. Money. Information. And children. The word sat heavy between us. I didn't know at first, she said. By the time I realized I was already in it. Owed them. And they knew about Daniel. Her eyes met mine, steady now. Michael found out. He tried to cut us loose, but you don't just walk away from something like that. He used his contacts to hide us. He stopped them from taking Daniel once. And now? Yes. They're patient, she said. They wait. And when the timing is right, they try again. I thought about the photos. The man in the background. The shadow at the playground fence. He's been following you for years. Her mouth tightened. He's a warning. If we run, he'll be the first to find us. And if you've talked to him. She stopped, shaking her head. You might be on their list now too. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed, and both of us turned toward the sound. You should tell me everything, I said. Every name, every address, everything you and Michael hid from me. Her gaze flicked to the window, then back to me. Not here. Not while they might be watching. When? Soon, she said. I'll bring the papers. But if you want to keep Hannah safe, you'll stay out of this until I call. I almost laughed. Sharp, humorless. It's too late for that. Her expression softened just a fraction. Then be careful. You don't know how far they'll go. When I left, the street was quiet again. But as I reached my car, I caught the faintest reflection in the side mirror. A shape, there and gone in the shadows near the laundromat. By the time I turned, the space was empty. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house felt like footsteps. Every gust of wind through the trees sounded like a car pulling up outside. I checked the locks twice. And still, just before dawn, I dreamed of Daniel's face. His eyes wide, his voice small, asking a question I couldn't answer. Why didn't you stop them? Sophia called 2 days later. No greeting, no small talk, just 3 words. It's time. Today. We met in the parking lot of a library halfway between our neighborhoods. The kind of place that felt too quiet, too public to be dangerous, until you noticed how easy it was to disappear in the back corner. Sophia's car pulled in next to mine. She stepped out with a canvas tote over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the lot before she joined me inside. We found a table tucked between tall shelves in the history section. She set the tote down, pulled out a thick manila envelope, and slid it across to me. Everything Michael collected. Everything he didn't want in their hands. My fingers hesitated at the flap. Inside were papers, photographs, and a single worn notebook. The first pages were filled with Michael's precise handwriting. Dates, names, and coded notes I didn't understand. Some were crossed out in red ink, others underlined twice. Halfway through, a page caught my breath. If something happens to me, it won't be an accident. Bridgewater will move on Sophia first. Then Daniel. Claire must decide if she's willing to step into this. If she does, she needs to take this notebook to Detective Rivas. He knows where the rest is hidden. There was an address scribbled beneath the note. One I didn't recognize. Who's Rivas? Asked. A cop Michael trusted, Sophia said. But trust is complicated in this. Rivas has been trying to bring Bridgewater down for years. It's why Michael worked with him in secret. Thumbed through more pages. There were photographs of the tall man. Close-ups, clear shots of the patch in his coat, Images of him entering and leaving buildings I'd never seen before. There were receipts, ledgers, and a list of wire transfers that made my stomach turn. Near the bottom of the envelope was a flash drive labeled in Michael's handwriting. Final. I didn't plug it in there. Not in a library where anyone could walk past. But I understood why Michael had kept it separate from everything else. It was meant to be the last piece, the one that tied everything together. Before I could speak again, Sophia leaned in, her voice low. You asked me once if I thought Michael loved you. He did. But he was also trying to protect you by keeping you in the dark. He thought if you didn't know, they wouldn't see you as a threat. Now they do. Something in my chest shifted at her words. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something close to clarity. We left together, her tote lighter now, both of us glancing over our shoulders. In the parking lot, we split without another word. She back to Daniel, me toward the address in Michael's notebook. It was an old warehouse on the edge of the city. Windows boarded up. A steel side door chained shut. I didn't go in. I just sat in my car across the street, trying to imagine what Michael had hidden there. And that's when I saw him. Tall man. A coat. Pet. He stepped out from behind a lamppost, hands in his pockets, and looked directly at me. No smile this time. Just a long measured stare. Then he turned and walked toward the water, disappearing into the gray. I went home that night knowing two things. First, Michael had been fighting something much larger than an affair or a mistake. Something that could still take Daniel if we weren't careful. And second, I couldn't walk away now. Not when the truth was finally in my hands. When I plugged in the flash drive, the screen filled with names, dates, and photographs. Evidence that could burn Bridgewater to the ground. At the very end of the folder was a single video file. Michael sat at his desk, the light low, his face drawn but steady. Claire, he said. If you're seeing this, I didn't make it. I'm sorry for what I kept from you. I'm sorry for the ways I failed you and Hannah. But please don't let them take Daniel. Don't let them win. This isn't just my mess anymore. It's ours now. And you. You're stronger than you think. The video ended, the screen going black. I sat there in the glow of the monitor, the rain starting again outside, knowing the fight he'd started was now mine to finish. And for the first time since Michael died, I didn't feel like I was standing in his shadow. I felt like I was standing exactly where I was meant to be.